In order to get started in a good way, I would like to welcome to Latvia respected Quw'utsun elder Philomena Williams to say a few words of welcome just to get us started off in a good way. So Philomena, you can do that for us.
Thanks, God. I can scroll down. Right, all that, mesti ook hier naar beneden en ga je zeggen, dan ga je uit en swallow and all. I welcomed each and every one of you to this beautiful, beautiful place, beautiful land that we are on. And thank you for bringing your good feelings here tonight. It's really, I really have to acknowledge about good feelings. I really like to keep I always talk about my Peter, always thankful for something each and every day. He was so strong with that. Even though he didn't have his vision, he couldn't feel, he couldn't smell. And every morning he was thankful for something. And we all need to be aware, like Tom said, beautiful area that we're in. What are you thankful for each day? But I thought I would just have an read to you some excerpts from some of the elders' teachings. And one of the words that I will say tonight, the watershed, I guess. The watershed will work for the healthier, safer rivers in the watershed. And it takes people like yourselves to be really, really working with keeping the river healthy, keeping that strong. And I thank each and every one of you for that. It's so very precious, that river of ours. I think our river is a historic river, right? Heritage river, okay. So and we should treat it so, I think. I just all of the elders before me have inspired me, but there is when we are working for Parks Canada, I have to say one of the little ones in grade 3 inspired me to keep on. I have to read you the letter she wrote when we finished at that school. There was 2 of us ladies there, and she said, ladies, I'd like to thank you for using your brains and making our school a funner place. Thank you for bringing all the animals. I really like the falcon. I also like the colors in the falcon. So I brought this to Mother right away. I said, Mom, I really do have brains. But you know, we need each other to inspire each other with something. Each one of us has a gift, right? So, you know, share that gift with others. But I'm just reading about the stories that our elders talked about when they used to go up the river. It would take them a week to get up to Lake Cowichan from here on their canoe. And it's not an easy task to do that. And you know, when people say, "Oh, I wish I lived back in the olden days," and I'm thinking, yeah, right. So it's you know, it's just good to remember, you know, how they used to use. There used to be Quw'utsun Sta'lo rope bridges back in the day as well, and all of their buckets and whatnot, all made from cedar. It was so amazing what they utilized with nature, but they survived. I won't talk too much. I like to go on tangents, so I better quit there. Right, Zaka. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Before we get started, I'd like to do a little bit of housekeeping, and I'm going to warn you up front. I've got new glasses that I'm supposed to be able to see near and far at the same time, and I can't see either. So We'll do the best I can. I'd like to tell you this speaker series event is going to be a little bit different. There'll be more going on than we usually have. We're really lucky to have the co-chairs of the Watershed Board with us tonight, so they will have an opportunity to speak from their perspective about the Weir. And then I'm going to tell the story of the Weir from my perspective. And then we are going to have a lot of time for questions and dialogue. And we have some subject matter experts in the audience that I'm going to introduce before the questions, because many of them will be probably better able to answer them than I am. So the questions you can direct at a variety of people. And then, as if that weren't enough, we're going to have a group photo. So we like everybody, and we've got two photographers. We have Parker and we have Barry, who I can't see, Barry. And so they're going to order us around, and they're going to tell us what to do and how to do it, and then they're going to take our picture. So if you don't want to buy into that, that's fine. But you know, those of you who have a sense of adventure, you can be part of the picture that will probably be used in Victoria to kind of demonstrate our community support for water sustainability in the Cowichan Valley. And finally, as if that weren't enough, I've heard that we may have a 6-foot dancing fish joining us for that photograph. So if you've not seen a 6-foot dancing fish before, you better stick around. So, and lastly, when you entered the room, members from Claris, the Cowichan Lake and River Stewardship Society, probably approached you with a request to write a letter. And if you can pick up some information from the handout or from what's said like tonight and jot a quick letter to the Premier or to Mr. Cullen and drop it off at the front desk when you leave, my understanding is they will be hand delivered to the ledge tomorrow. So that's what's going on tonight. Without further ado, I would like to introduce the co-chairs of the Cowichan Watershed Board, Chief Lydia Hwitsum and Chair Aaron Stone. These folks have demonstrated tremendous leadership in our community around water sustainability and around the Weir and around lots of other things as well. They are two of the busiest people on the planet, and they have sacrificed their evening to be with us like tonight to speak to something they feel very strongly about. So I'm going to invite Chief and Chair up to provide a little bit of perspective on the Weir.
Thanks, the CIA, respected friends, the Squam, the Quw'utsun Sta'lo, the Sultan, Hwitsum, almost all the Quail or the native. On this day, happy to welcome and acknowledge everyone to our meeting today. And appropriately thankful for the opportunity to be joining you, thankful for all of those that are in the room today, and then all of those who have had it in their heart to stand up and speak for the natural world, and the recognition that we're in a strong relationship with the natural world, and we need to be good partners in that going forward. Thankful to be here with my co-chair here. Always very important to acknowledge the Cowichan Watershed Board and those that are around that table and have been around that table for over a decade, looking at ways that we can work together, recognizing the multiple jurisdictions and decision makers that have a say in what happens to our valley, what happens to our river, and finding those ways to look for the level of collaboration and coordination and try to do the work to recognize that with these multiple jurisdictions and decisions being made, there's a cumulative impact on the natural world and a cumulative impact on our river. And when we've seen climate change impact us the way we're seeing it come at us so hard, and to see sections of the river dry up, you know, just wouldn't have thought that would happen, like as a child growing up in this valley my whole life. So there's a certain urgency that brings us together as well. And a lot of really strong advocacy work that we can demonstrate coming together with the Cowichan Watershed Board level. Everybody, the CVRD, Cowichan Tribes, doing that work to recognize the existing rights and title of Hwitsum Sta'lo. That decision-making exercises and all of the authorities aren't hived up in the Canadian Constitution. There are voices that we've had to bring forward as Somenos Lake, as people of this land, to ensure that we're speaking up for the natural world. It's been such interesting work to find out how we are all actually impacting each other in our relationship with our river. The urgency around the Weir and the collective effort to find the necessary capital to just get in a position where we can manage the flows in the Cowichan River, support our relationship with our river. So lots of advocacy work. We've been able to stand up for the Quw'utsun Sta'lo, looking to close that gap in the capital we need to get that Weir done, so that we can get to an actual sustainability approach. At this point, it's like life support, where we need to get to a place where we're not only, as I said, collaborating, but looking at what are the flows. I think is what I've seen is, as we've been doing this work just over the last even just reflecting on the last 5 years, we start talking about the water in a different way, being in relationship with the water, being in a place to recognize the value. And I keep saying this in the work with land, water, and resource stewardship with the province, doing work to really look at the work we're doing here in water governance and look at the rest of the province and start lifting an ecological reference point for how we work together and managing watersheds throughout the province. So the work on it that's been happening here, coordinating around that watershed table, we're seeing the reflections, I think, in the value of how we can come together and recognize the impacts that we're having. So we've been knocking on every political door. We do have the federal funding secured in place, looking now at a lot of advocacy work that both Aaron and I have been involved with the Premier, like lifting up the real need and attention that is critical for our life-sustaining systems in our river. I'll turn it over to Aaron, because I think the part of the work we've been doing again is leveraging, getting our story out there, understanding the urgency, and that we do have a collective collaborative table where we could be making decisions and get to ensuring that our life-sustaining river continues to have that life to sustain us, and all that it survives based on that life-giving force. So yeah, thankful for everybody here this evening, thankful to be in Quw'utsun territory, and for our elders' good words to get us started.
Thank you. Well, you can see how fortunate we are to have such a skillful orator and collaborator to work with. For me, it's a lifelong story too. I grew up in the Cowichan. I've lived at the mouth of the Cowichan River, in the estuary of Cowichan Bay, and up at the lake as well throughout my life. And I grew to have a special appreciation for it, and never really understood the critical status of the river until I got involved in politics. It's something we all take for granted as children growing up, that we play in the river and don't think another thing about it, or we drink the water, or we fish for fish, and we never really thought about it. But of course, as things have evolved, and now a few decades later, to get rid of the hair thing, it was for Halloween costumes. I'm not as young as the hair makes me look. I'm not just kidding. This was on Saturday. But there's been times during this journey for me that have felt inspiring, and I see in just what everyone here feels like extended family of the Cowichan River. At different events throughout this whole decade almost that I've been involved in the work, I've spent time with just about every one of you at one form or another, whether it's at the Watershed Board table, events, there's people in the science fields and stuff that help inform people like me that don't really know until I get taught. So that we're well armed. I don't think you recognized me when you came in. So that we're well informed, so that when we go do the work that we do, when we go into those meetings, that we're well prepared and we can speak with knowledge and passion. But for me, what really moves me more is the passion that we all have and how it feels heart-centered work, right? And I think this speaks to the deep connection that we all feel to the river that helps drive that alignment between head and heart. And there's been times in this journey for me that felt hopeless and frustrating. I got to tell you, when the surplus money was announced in March and we didn't get the money that we needed from the province, I was furious and heartbroken at the same time. It felt like a huge defeat. But at the same time, in the months since, we've really been able to get into those doors and get into those rooms to the point where now it's on the lips of every minister and the premier. We just came from the Weir conference last week, where the Cowichan River being on life support was part of an economic address by the premier, right? A couple of weeks ago, we were on a provincial drought call. Minister Collin was on there, and we've been sending them pointed messages about when is the province going to come forward with the necessary funding, their necessary funding to make the Weir reality. And they give us positive signs. I'm in politics too, so there's never anything definitive until you get the embargo off an announcement, but the momentum feels stronger than ever. And you turn those what feel like soul crushing defeats into positive action. And I feel so gifted to be able to work with you, because not only do you bring that same attachment, but such a deep historical attachment to the river, but also just the skill and the knowledge that comes with somebody of your stature. And I feel gifted to work with you. So, but for me, it is a passion project. I said today, because we have our annual chair elections every year, and part of being the chair of the CVRD is that you get to sit as co-chair of the Cowichan Watershed Board. And I've said every time I get that opportunity, that it's the greatest gift and the biggest honor that I have. It's the best table that I sit at. And it's because, you know, we work with people like Elodie and David. I'm always going to say about how we agree on some things like this, but not on all things, like rails to trail. But we're heartfelt collaborators, right? Everybody that's in this room that comes to those meetings, that comes to the events in the river, are there because it means something to them beyond just the science or the water availability or the science of the fish, right? We're all there because it means something to us deeply, right? And I think that's the power of the organization and the collaborative relationship that we have. I think about the first Cowichan Watershed Board engagement I had was an elders lunch at Cowichan Tribes. And those opportunities for someone like me to be able to learn and be welcomed and accepted into the Quw'utsun people's place and the stories that are told, right? And we lost Susila. And I remember him being in the middle of the room, being a joker, but also telling us really deep, meaningful stories, right? That help us feel attached to the place that we all grew up, but not really knowing the depth of meaning and the spiritual importance of it. When we talk about returning cultural values to the valley, those are the things that for people like me, we don't ever truly understand, but getting those little glimpses into the meaning of this place is truly a gift that I don't think we can overlook. So then when we get to go into the premier's meeting, yeah, it's dollars and you know, bang the table a little bit and use a pointy stick if you got one. But it's backed up by a deep sense of belonging and passion that you can only have when we have the kind of family that we have here, right? And I feel blessed and gifted that all of you are here tonight. So I raise my hands to all of you in gratitude. But I'm just so thankful to work with you and to work with all of you as we try and get this done. And I'm feeling as positive as I ever have. So for someone who gets given to pessimism and heartbreak quite easily, pretty emo, I'm encouraged, and I think that that's the best message that I can leave everyone with. There's still work to do, but I'm encouraged.
And just continue to do that work and press where we need to, and I want to also reference Nutsamot Pusiais the Cup, because there are many things we agree on and don't agree on, but when Nutsamot Pusiais the Cup, when it comes to water, we're gonna work together. And so whatever other differences we have, bringing that piece in and being able to recognize where our focus is adds a lot to dispelling some of, like, we don't have to solve all of our relationships. They've been unfolding for the last 150 plus years on the island. So, but when it just that we can come together, that we can embrace our language as well in terms of the recognition and the strength that comes from saying, yes, for the sake of our water, we are going to work together. And we find that lesson in the language of the Quw'utsun Sta'lo. So the premier did host as well. This was during UBC and the BCAFN chiefs meetings. The premier hosted a round table on watersheds, and so he had hosted it in his boardroom in Vancouver there, and it was really interesting opportunity. I was able to help open the session, but there was a mix of all interests around the table. And that was reinforcing, I think, that when we see or recognize our mutual reliance, but the fact that if we don't work together, we're gonna be, our river could actually dry up. There could be something in the lifetime of my grandchildren to think that we once had a river. You know, that's the heartbreaking part. Like I've lost sleep over the fish in our river. I'm just, you know, that with the fish kill that happened, and we start to see these real impacts on our river and the flows, and I see Sherry here, and I know she just want to acknowledge her bringing in a lot of help in Cowichan for years as well, and continuing to work. But one of the things is we really changed the way we're thinking about water. So we thought, well, how much flow does the river need? Well, how do you determine how much flow? So the work that I've been doing with the First Nations Fisheries Council under their Water for Fish initiative to lifting up. When we think about flows in river, it's not just what does industry need. It's not just how much can we take before it's too late. So just being able to think about flows for fish. We talk about indigenous water flows. What are the needs of Quamo people in terms of our reliance on the river and the many ways that we are in relationship with the river? So I love that we're lifting up our commitment to water with each other, and it's certainly kind of in the face of urgency as well. So there's always a bit of urgency that we can draw on that energy as well. So yeah, just the collaborative effort as well. I'm just feeling the Quw'utsun Chiefs as well had a meeting 2 weeks ago, and it was Minister of Forests, Land, Water and Resource Stewardship, and Indigenous Relations. And we're able to, as well as a Quw'utsun Nation, lift up for those ministers as well the importance of the collective decision making they're making, and they started pointing me at that. We know that we get it, and they're pointing at the Minister of Finance. Like, so now, okay, I'm going to meet with the Minister of Finance next week, and we're going to continue to press for how we leverage the resources we need. So the collaborative effort, you just can't overemphasize the outcomes that we see when we find those ways to work together, and that's what puts the ice the cup for the sake of our water. I think we've taken up enough time.
Well, that's a hard act to follow, I must say. But I think that's a good example of why people look to the Cowichan Valley for leadership, because we have such progressive leaders. And I know I've had the opportunity to meet with fish people and water people from all across the province. And they continually refer to the Cowichan Valley. And it's because of leaders like Chief Hwitsum and Chair Stone, who realize the importance of working together and who are passionate about the work. So it's a real privilege to be able to do this work with you. So I'm gonna take off my MC hat, and now I'm a speaker. What I wanted to do tonight, and I'm looking out at you, and I think I'm preaching to the choir to quite a high degree. So I wanted to tell the story. I don't have any slides. I wanted to tell the story of the river and the Weir. And, you know, some of you know this story and some of you may not, and some of you may know parts of it. But I think it's worthwhile. And I'd like to start off by echoing some of the sentiment from our co-chairs about the passion involved in this. And I've been privileged to work with some of you in this room that I've learned a lot from. From Larry George, Chief, Tim Kolchiski, Shannon Waters. And one of the things I've learned is that Indigenous people, as I understand it, don't look at water as a resource. They look at water as a relative. And if you just change your mindset around that, I mean, to me, it makes a big difference. And it makes thinking about some of the things we work towards much more natural, right? Like, no one's going to beat up their granny, right? And we've been beating up the river for a long time. And it's not sustainable, and it's not good behavior, and it's not something we should be doing or can do anymore. And often when I think about the river, I think about the Weir, I think about all the work we're trying to do. That's how I try and think about it now, is that it's part of our family, it's part of all of our families. And for me, that makes it more meaningful, and it makes it more sense, right? Going to all these meetings and all this hard work we're doing, of course we're doing it, right? Family first, family first. So I'd like to start off by just maybe talking about the river a bit. As a salmon biologist, I can tell you that the river supports 4 species of anadromous fish. Fish that spend part of their life here in our river and then swim halfway to Japan. Chinook salmon, steelhead, chum salmon, and coho. So that's a miracle in itself, right? The fact that these fish spend time here, swim way out in the middle of the ocean, find their way back. I'm a scuba diver and I can get lost in a swimming pool, right? Like that's a major miracle in my mind. And there are other miracles, right? But that's one I really understand as a fisheries biologist. And it's incredible that we have an opportunity to live here. As the co-chairs have said, our river is really inextricably linked to the culture and the well-being of the Quw'utsun people and this place. Like, we are truly a community that a river runs through, and I really believe it defines us. It certainly defines like the Indigenous people who've been here for millennia, but I think it defines me too. And I think it's important. So we live in a community with a river. We also live in a community where the climate is changing, right? And that is also an inextricable fact. Certainly thanks to the work of CVRD for the climate change downscaling done by Pacific Climate Impact Consortium. And that's good science. We know that our summers are getting warmer and drier, and we know that our winters are getting warmer and wetter. So that means no more snowpack. By the year 2050, there will be no more snow. And the snow is that natural water storage we have. I'm a backcountry skier. I love to go up to Heather, although my knees are getting a little bit creaky these days to do a lot of telly turns, but I still make it up to the top of Heather most years. And my avalanche pro used to be, I could sink it in the snow and I wouldn't see it. So that's just over a couple meters every year, like clockwork. That's changing. And the thing about that is that snowpack provides our river with inflows through May, June, into July, and has done that forever. That's not going to happen anymore. We won't have that natural storage, and we're going to have hotter, drier. We are having hotter, drier summers, right? What is now a drought, like we've experienced this year, by 2050 will be a normal summer. And a drought in 2050 will look quite a bit different. So we have a river that supports salmon and supports all of us, and we have a climate that's changing. And I think that's why a conversation about the Weir is very relevant to us. We have a Weir, right? The Weir was built in 1957. So it's almost as old as I am. Not quite, but it's getting there, which means it's pretty old. And it stores about a meter of water, 97 centimeters of water. And for the first 40 years of existence, from 57 to 97, it never failed to store enough water in the spring when it went on control in April to provide enough water for environmental flows in the river and industrial flows for the mill every year, without fail, money in the bank. The last 20 years, it's failed to do so 15 times. So I'm not a climate scientist, but that looks like a trend to me, right? And I think that's what we can expect in the future. So there's a real rationale here for looking for a way to somehow replace that storage that we are used to receiving as snow, which we're not going to receive anymore, and storing some of that water in the winter, which there's going to be more rain in the winter, so that we can use that to sustain our river in the summer. Right? Climate change is real, it's here, and our current structure is inadequate. And what's happening because of that, and again, I'm going to constantly bring this back to salmon because I'm a salmon biologist, is our salmon populations are under siege. And the water they need to support the various life history phases, from tiny swim up fry to returning 30-pound adults, that water is not there at the right time, in the right place, in the right amount anymore. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later on, what that looks like and what that looked like this year. The bright point in all of this is that we can fix it, right? A lot of watersheds haven't got the second largest lake in on Vancouver Island, but ours does. So there is a way we can deal with this. And I want to talk a little bit of philosophy as opposed to biology, in that I've been a biologist for almost 45 years. And the first 30 years of my career, I was one of those kind of elitist non-interventionists, right? If we stop catching too many fish, if we stop destroying habitat, if we stop polluting our water, salmon are going to be okay. We just have to stop screwing up and they'll be fine. I don't think that anymore. I don't think that anymore. I think we screwed up too much. I think with climate change and the situation we have now, not doing anything is a recipe for disaster. I think we've gone too far. I think we have to act boldly now, and we have to assume the risk that comes with acting boldly. And we have to intervene, right, to adapt to climate change, to mitigate climate change, because it's not going away. So we don't have a choice anymore. And for me, everyone likes to think of themselves as a professional, but as a professional biologist, that's a big difference in how I think about the work we should be doing together. And I just really feel that we need to step up. We need to step up for salmon. For millennia, salmon have been supporting us. We need to support them now. And I don't think there's any way to succeed if we just keep doing the same things we've always done and hope things are going to change for the better, because they're not. So I wanted to talk about what's been done so far with this weird thing, right? So the first study here in the Cowichan to look at what a new weir should look like and how big it should be and how much it was going to cost and where it should go was done by KMG in 1991. That's what, 30 years ago? So we've been talking about this for a long time, right? And I see people in the room looking at Larry, looking at myself, looking at the chief, looking at Sherry, who have been working on this for like 25 years. So that says two things. One is we haven't done a very good job because we're still working on it. But secondly, it's complicated. And one of the things I learned, I went to a lecture by Joe Wheaton, who was a stage 0 restoration biologist a little while ago. And Sherry organized that. And he prefaced almost every answer to every question by, it's complicated. So I feel like I have license to say that as well. This is complicated. The first time there wasn't enough water in the river for salmon to swim upstream was 2003. And I remember clearly that J.R. Elliott and Gary Rowland, Sam at the hatchery motivated the crew, and they started catching fish in the estuary and trucking them upstream because there wasn't enough water for them to swim. That's happened 3 times. Like, that's not acceptable, right? That's not a recipe for success. And that first time in 2003 really started the ball rolling, because for those of you who were around, fisheries actually asked the mill to close down. And he said, we're going to charge you if you don't close down. And the province stepped in and said, you can't do that. They have every right to the water. We manage water. And then the union at the mill said, we're going to walk off the job. And then Cowichan Tribes said, there are fish, it's our river, we'll tell you guys what to do. And I remember we had a meeting, I think Larry was there, the Cowichan Tribes, and it was one of those table pounding meetings. And we went outside afterwards in the parking lot. And we said, this really sucked, right? We need to find a way to work together. And that was the start of the roundtable, the Cowichan Stewardship Roundtable. And one of the first things that table did was say, we need a plan. We need a plan to get out of this. And that started the Cowichan Basin Water Management Planning process. And that plan was completed in 2007. And it won an award for being a wonderful plan. And it also called for higher weir. So that's 16 years ago. It was no one's job to do that work, right? Who's going to build a higher weir, right? First Nation, the government, NGOs. So there was a call for a group to be formed, maybe a board, right, to move this work forward. And in 2010, the Cowichan Watershed Board was formed. In 2018, so 8 years later, there was a water use planning process. So the same process that BC Hydro uses to plan how they're going to manage a large, Site C. CVRD actually led that in partnership with Cowichan Tribes here in the valley. It was the first one that wasn't done by BC Hydro, that had nothing to do with hydropower and everything to do with water and river sustainability. And so that process, which wasn't perfect, but which included people with a variety of opinions and had animated conversations, and I know a few of you were part of that, came up with a consensus. The last day of a 9-month process, the last day came up with a consensus, and that was raise the weir 70 centimeters, but do your homework first and make sure that we know what the effects of that are. So that was 2018. So a couple of years later, again, CVRD, Cowichan Tribes Partnership, came up with a successful grant, a large grant, to do 2 things. One was to design a new weir. So to do the engineering, feasibility, design work for that structure. And Stantec was retained to do that work. It has been completed. And one little piece that I had a small role in was fish passage, right? Which is important to me. Like, how do we get, like fish over the weir? And at the time, I was a little bit flippant, but fish life histories are more complicated than you would think. It's not just a big salmon kind of going to spawn and little salmon going downstream, right? Fish of various life histories of various species need to move up and down at various times of the year. So we tasked that engineering team of providing fish access that would be useful for all life history phases from fry to adults, upstream and downstream, 365 days a year. And they came up with that. So there's not one fish way, there's 3 fish ways. And that's an example that I understand of the level of detail and thought that went into this. The other piece of work that was funded was an upstream impact assessment. So what's this going to do to the lake? What's it going to do to the people who live around it and their properties? What's that going to look like? And if you have interest, one of the outcomes of that was something called a property management tool. You can go online, you can plug in any address like around the lake. You will get an ortho photo of the property and the house and the dock and the car and the lawnmower that was left out in the rain and the patio furniture. And you can see lines on that map, what the lake level is going to be when there's no storage, when the current weir is full, when a new weir would be full, where it is in the winter at high water and the 200-year flood, every property. So we know what we're talking about, right? There's no more guessing. So all that work has been done. All that work has been done. So we have a shovel-ready project. So we are ready to go with this deed. So I wanted to talk a little bit, and I'm conscious of time, and I'm hoping we have lots of time for a conversation rather than a monologue. It's worthwhile, I think, talking about what happened this summer, the summer of 2003. So it was another summer of drought. And for those of you that don't know, there is a process to make in-season management decisions, which includes Cowichan Tribes and the mill and Fisheries and Oceans and the provincial folks and the Watershed Board. And those people have really difficult conversations because this year it was quite evident there wasn't going to be a lot of water stretching out. And the kind of conversations we have are, we need quite a bit of flow in the springtime because that's when in the early spring in April, the steelhead eggs are still in the gravel. So if we start reducing flow, we're going to dry those puppies up and they're going to die. So like in April, we need about 25 cubic meters a second. Come May into June, that's when the coho smolts are moving out of the side channels where they spend the winter, where they're not right in the mainstream, into the side channel, from the side channels into the mainstream so they can get downstream. They need a certain amount of flow. That's when the Chinook fry, which come out of the gravel in early April and spend 90 days in the river before they end up in the estuary in late May. During that time, they have to quintuple in size, go from 0.5 gram to about 2.5 grams in order to survive once they hit the estuary. That's a really important time for them. And where they hang out when they're small is right in the emergent vegetation at the edge of the river. Not in the middle, at the edge. So if there's no water at the edge, they don't do very well. So at that time of year, from 1st of May to the middle of June, we need about 15 cubic meters per second. There's good science around this. And then in the summer, that's when the coho juveniles live in the winter all year, along with all the trout species. We need about 7 cubic meters per second. So the gut-wrenching conversations are, do we keep the water flow high enough that the Chinook juveniles are going to survive, acknowledging that we may run out of water? Or do we lower the flow, knowing we're going to impact on the survivability of last year's spawn in order to get this year's fish up the river? There's no good choices. And those conversations are hard conversations. How it ended up this year is spring flows were maintained right up to the middle of June, where we'd like them. And then rather than dropping to 7, it was dropped right down to 4.5. In an effort to make sure we had water when the fall rains came. And you know what? We have done that before. And it's not good. We're just balancing on the knife edge of survivability with respect to warm temperatures, low flows. And this year, for the first time, we fell off the wrong side. There was a major fish kill in the Cowichan River. It's estimated tens of thousands of fish died. That's never happened. And it certainly could happen in the future. The other thing that I want to point out about this year is even after all that, we got into September and we ran out of water. So September 13th, there was no longer enough water in the lake to push out minimal flow of 4.5 CMS. And as most of you know, large industrial pumps were installed and we ended up having to pump water out of the lake into the river, lowering the lake, arguably lower than it's ever been in geological time, and having significant impacts around the littoral habitats around the edge of the lake, which are super productive fish habitats, in order to keep water in the river. That's the definition of lose-lose, right? And we had to pump water for 36 days, 36 days, before we finally had enough rain. And if that's not scary enough, we stopped pumping, and 5 days later, we had a major storm, a snowfall, but I had 10 inches of snow in my place, and the power was out for 48 hours. The power was out up at the lake. Just imagine if that had happened 5 days earlier, and we were pumping water with electric pumps. Right? So that's where we are. That's where we are. And that's why many of us are working really hard with strong leadership to have the infrastructure so we can store a little bit more water. So I have a sense of urgency here, right? And we do not want to see another fish kill in this river. We do not want to have to resort to pumps. And there's a timeline involved. And I'll share a little bit of that. So right now, Catalyst Paper has a license from the government, but to do that pumping. And that license expires in 2028. And if I was a betting man, I would bet you that license is not going to be extended. Because we have SARA listed species in the lake. And it's hard to argue that pumping does not negatively impact but Cowichan lamprey, which are found nowhere else in the world in Cowichan. So we've got 4 years of pumping, and then after that, that very imperfect, but the only backstop we have is gone. It's going to take us 2 years to build the Weir, and before we start building it, we need a license. We need a water license that clearly states who holds that license to store the water and who owns the structure. That licensing process, which is subject to environmental appeal and the Environmental Appeal Board, is probably going to take 1.5 years. So if you do the math, and I'm a biologist, I'm not a mathematician, but even I can figure out that's about 4 years. So 2028 minus 4 is 2024. We don't get the show on the road pretty quickly, we're going to lose that backstop, right? We're going to run into a situation where when we run out of water, we run out of water. There's no pumping the river. Yeah. So I have a sense of urgency. So what are we doing about this, right? What's happening? We've heard a little bit about the politicking and strong, I guess, advocacy work. Over the past 2 years, there has been a lot of heavy lifting to move this work forward. Cowichan Tribes has financed high-end consultants at considerable cost to bring the partners together. And that would include Cowichan Tribes, CVRD, the mill, the province, and the Watershed. There was an MOU signed about 1 year ago between the local players, the mill, Cowichan Tribes, CVRD, saying we're not walking away from this. We are going to commit. They're going to commit like to figure this out. Cowichan Tribes was granted from Infrastructure Canada $14 million, like to build this baby, right? The approximate cost is going to be about double that. So what are the hurdles? And this is what I wanted to share with you, because a lot of you probably know everything I've said, but I think it's worth saying. And I want to share with you what's happening now, because a lot of folks are working really hard on this. And so, sometimes I feel like the duck, right? You see the ducks just hanging out under the water. There's a whole lot of paddling going on. There is a whole lot of paddling going on here. The first hurdle is the money. We've got 14 million. We're having the 24. Well, just the cost estimate revamped, or I guess updated. Because I don't know about you, but I just did a rental in my house and the budget came in about double what I was expecting. So the number we have from Stantec is a couple years old. That number was 20 million, give or take, for the Weir, 3 million on top of that, give or take, for a walkway, which would turn the Weir into like a real community asset. We can have art projects, we can have events on the Weir, we can walk across it. So that's 23. We're estimating now 28, but we're having a real solid estimate done. So that's in the works. So we're short about $14 million is bottom line. And as you've heard, there's a lot of work going on at the political level. We feel that the feds have stepped up with their half, that it's time for the province to step up as well. And we feel that very strongly, and our leadership has been very effective, but we're not over the top yet. So we're hoping that happens really quickly. And I share the optimism that the chief and chair shared with you. We've all had conversations at a variety of levels within the provincial system, and we are getting some positive vibes. A letter from you would probably help. The other thing that's holding us back, which is a little more complicated and a little harder to understand, is the licensing and ownership piece. So in BC, to have infrastructure like a Weir, somebody has to hold the license and somebody has to own the structure. And there are responsibilities that come with that. And there are three that immediately jump to mind. One is the owner is responsible for operations and maintenance. So all the dam safety work, all the operational work to run it. Right now, my understanding is that's about $500,000 a year, right? For the life of the structure. So hopefully, whatever, 67 years. So that's a big commitment. The second responsibility that comes along with the licensing piece is liability. Failure, catastrophic failure. And these things are pretty well engineered and it's not a lot of water. But if that were to happen, the owner is responsible. And I'll just share with you that this is not going to be like tearing apart people's houses downstream. If the Weir at full storage were to fail, absolutely, the flows would be less than a winter storm. So it's not going to be that kind of failure. But if that were to happen and we're having a warm June and there's 1,000 tubers in the river and the water flow increases from 7 CMS to 100 CMS, it would be a chaotic event, right? So there's liability associated with that. The owner of the structure is responsible for that. The third piece, in fact, is compensation, if there's any compensation. So the water level of the Weir at full storage is well below winter high water, the average winter high water. So it's not going to flood people's properties out that aren't flooded out now. However, the object of this thing is to store water in the spring, and it's going to store water in the spring, and lake levels are going to be higher in the spring than it would have been otherwise. So if I'm a property owner and I have a beach and I'm used to my beach looking a certain way in July, it'll probably be smaller. I'll have a smaller beach. right? And that's a fact, that is going to happen. So the question is, what's that, right? What's that like? Is that worth something? Is the owner of the structure liable for some kind of deal because we've got less beach? As I understand it, that process is worked through by the water authorizations branch once the license goes in. So they're the arbitrators. They get to say, yeah, you're losing something, but we don't think it's worth compensation, or we think you should be paid $10 million or whatever, right? Somewhere on that scale. So the point is, nobody knows until that license application goes in. And then even once there's a decision, it can be appealed to the Environmental Appeal. So looking at the great work that Kerwood Liddell did, right, on all this upstream, you know, they looked at waves and erosion and wind and like it was, in fact, it won an award for the best work that's ever been done like of that kind. And the water authorizations folks have told us, man, this is way more than we got for Site C. So I think we're doing okay with this, right? But the bottom line is no one really knows until the license application goes in. But in order for the license application to go in, someone has to accept that, right? Not really knowing what it is. We're thinking it's going to be low. So what the partners are hoping is that the province would step up and help us with this. Because if you think about this project, this is what water sustainability for our community looks like. This is what a healthy river looks like. This is what salmon for the future looks like. This is what a positive economic future for our valley looks like. This might be that first stumbling step down the path of reconciliation to ensure that Cowichan people have the ability to practice, you know, cultural and spiritual practices on the river and harvest fish on the river, right? This is what that looks like. This checks every mandate that the province has, every box. So we think that they would help us with this tricky bit. And what we're looking for here is the province, who is a regulator, to be a partner and to help us work through this together and to step up and assume some responsibility. Because I'll tell you something, I do not want to be in the room when some provincial person in licensing branch or another branch looks at Chief Hwitsum and said, well, you're going to be responsible for compensating property owners around the lake for your actions on their property. That's not a conversation anybody wants to have, right? That's not, it's not on, right, in BC in 2023. So somewhere in this deal, the province needs to step up and act as a partner and help us work through this. That hasn't happened so far, and we're hoping it will. So what's the bottom line here? And I'm conscious. We're past the point of the river being able to recover naturally. This is what climate change looks like. We're going to have to change, and we're going to have to support our river. This project will provide us with that. Will provide us with a path towards water and salmon and community and economic sustainability in our valley, respecting Cowichan Tribes' rights and title. Our local community is leading this work. We have done the heavy lifting from like 2003 through the water basin plan, through the water use plan. We're doing this ourselves. All the engineering design work, all the upstream impact work. Our community is doing that. Like, we are setting the example for the province. And in fact, people are noticing. My philosophy about this stuff is we shouldn't expect local government to do this for us, right? The best people to look after the watershed are the people who live here. However, we do need the support. We do need the support of senior government. And so we are well down the path a lot of good people who are in this room have really done a lot of work on this over the years. We all should give ourselves a small pat on the back, but not a big one, because we're not there yet. We need the funding, we need the support from the province on the licensing piece. We're working hard on that. We are meeting regularly amongst ourselves, and we're reaching out to the province. So how can you help? I'm glad you asked. You can write a letter saying, you know what? I live in the Cowichan Valley. We need help. We need a sustainable river with a sustainable salmon population that respects Cowichan Tribes' rights to title. And you, I think most of you have a piece of paper and a pen. So if you could do that tonight, that would be great. There's one other thing I'd like you to do now. I'm going to ask for a favor right here, right now. So this is going to require a little bit of exercise on your part. So I'd like everybody who has been to a meeting or a webinar about the Weir to stand up.
What about this one?
This one doesn't count. So man, I was gonna go through a whole string of things, right? People who have been to the what process, but I'm gonna stop right here. Or maybe not. One more question. I'd like to ask anyone who's read an article in the paper or the discourse, who's not standing up now, to stand up. Great. Okay, so this is the team, right? This is the team that's going to bring this home. And the reason this is going to work is because we live in a community where people stand up. And this gives me a lot of joy, right? There's nobody sitting. And well, yeah, so I'm not gonna say anything else, right? You can sit down now. Thank you. Thank you for standing up, and also thank you for caring about this, right? Like, this is awesome. So that's all I have to say, right? We all thought it was worth bringing us together to listen to our leadership, right? To listen to our elders, and for me to give you a little update on what's going on with the Weir. So I would like now to open it up for questions, but before I do that, I don't want to have to answer all the questions. So I've asked the co-chairs if they would be willing to answer questions. I'd like to call a few people out too who might be able to answer questions. I'd like to acknowledge Larry George, the director of Cowichan Tribes, who's been working on this longer than I have. I'd like to acknowledge Leroy van Weir, who was the project manager for the engineering piece and the upstream impact piece. I'd like to acknowledge Brian Hoole, who's the environmental manager for Catalyst Paper. And I'd like to acknowledge Sherry Ayers, who's fisheries biologist extraordinaire, part of the WUP process, who knows, it's going to pain me to say this, but knows more about the biology of salmon river than I do. So, subject matter expert. So if any of you have questions, you can direct them to me, and I'm going to pick on the people that I identified if I feel they're better suited to answer than I am. And you may have no questions, but I can't believe that. Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, just given that I'm getting older and I have grandchildren, and I like to think to the future. I don't think I've read anything about what happens with the Weir in 30, 40, 50 years. Is this part of the study to see what happens for my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren? How long, because you mentioned in what you said that 40 years ago, things were good, built the Weir, it lasted for that period of time, then it wasn't good anymore. So how long will a new Weir last for, given the trend in the climate? You can see.
That's a super question. I have a quick answer, and then I'll offer anyone who will mention answer as well. So, two things. When we went through the water use planning process, I will say that Cowichan has probably the best hydrological data of practically any river in BC. we've got like almost 100-year data set. So it's the modeler's dream for this, you know, kind of, we threw it out. We didn't use it. We used the climate change projections for 2050. So when and it made things way more difficult. So that's one thing, right? We realized we weren't planning for 1988, right? We were planning for 2050 and beyond. So the Weir was designed with that in mind. Secondly, the Weir is not a panacea, right? I think it's a tool we can use that's going to make a big difference quickly. We need to do other things in the watershed as well. And I spoke to the work that Joe Wheaton is doing that Sherry's brought to our watershed, this, you know, stage 0, low tech restoration work that we all should be engaging in. There's a suite of projects we have to do, I think, to make sure that your grandkids and my grandkids have salmon. It's not just about the Weir, but the Weir is low-hanging fruit. It's something that's going to make a large difference quickly, and it's going to give us time to implement these more natural solutions, right, to stabilize our watershed and to improve the hydrology. So that's a super question, and it's something I'm thinking about. But I think it's like something that's going to give us time so we can implement other restorative practices in the watershed that are a little more natural than like a bunch of concrete. But that does not mean a bunch of concrete isn't going to help us out, because I'm really convinced it is. And I'm just wondering if anyone else has a comment on that.
I'd comment.
Okay, Sherry, and then Leroy.
Okay. I was part of the water use planning process as well, and Tom mentioned that at the beginning when he was talking about it, that it was really the last day when it was kind of a Hail Mary of, okay, we're either gonna throw this whole thing out or we're gonna try and come to some agreement. And for me, a lot of it was around, we had to compromise from what we thought we really needed to get us through this to a lower level, because there was this uncertainty around where the natural boundary was and how that was going to affect the people around the lake. And so there was that was really hard to do. And I remember just being like, oh God, if only we could just have that extra 0.3, we could maybe, you know, get through this uncertainty that even the PEAK data, the climate change data has, because they don't really know, like, these are just projections. And it's just like the 1 to 200 year event flood. We don't know what that really looks like. Because every year we're adjusting that based on the flow record that we have. So we're just, I mean, what we had to choose in that situation was getting something now, starting on the process of getting something now, rather than just talking about it with this uncertainty still there. So whether or not it will stand up in 40 years from now it's a crapshoot. It's just like, are we gonna still, you know, have rain coming out of, you know, the sky in the summertime in 40 years from now? I don't know, you know. So it's, you know, it's kind of was a choice that we needed to move forward, and that agreement that we were able to get there was, in my opinion, a huge win, because we were able to kind of get somewhere and have a process that had some rigor and integrity, that had a variety of people, you know, from all walks sitting around the table, and we came to an agreement. Even though it was the last day, it was, you know, we actually got there, and I think that was really important, and that process leveraged us into this, along with all the other history and work that was done in years past. But yeah, I don't know that we can say it with certainty that it, you know, 40 years from now, maybe there'll be some other magic thing that technology provides or whatever, right? That we can, or we will have made some shifts in the way that we live and the way that we use water, and water really does become for everyone that relative that we look after.
Leroy, do you have a comment?
Well, I just wanted to, agree with Sherry. I mean, I was part of the public advisory group that I walked plan. So yeah, we reached a compromise, and I think came out of that was a path forward. But we also, I think the modeling at that time said something like, we'll achieve the results in 9 years out of 10. So even with the plan we have, it doesn't, create the optimum solution for the next, 50 years. We're gonna achieve our goals 9 years out of 10. There's still gonna be some challenges even with the new Weir. The other thing we did is, we got asked the question of, when we design and build a new Weir, should we design it with the intent of perhaps being able to build on top of it in the future? And we thought we would not spend money and effort to do that. And the reason for that was, it's been 66 years since the first structure was built. If we wait another 50 years, we're going to see the same sort of issues we see today. And that is upgraded engineering designs, upgraded earthquake control issues. We'll have some new modeling, we'll have new PFIC data. So let's not spend any energy and waste any money designing for something 50 years from now that really isn't going to add value. So 50 years from now, if we decide that we could build on top and make it higher, it's an opportunity. Or maybe we do what we do this time and start fresh with a new design, new structure. Just don't know. But it's a great place to move forward on. It's not the tendency.
This is, I believe, Tom, that the 70 centimeters, just so that people understand what that looks like in days, I believe that 7 cubic meters a second out of the lake, 1 centimeter a day is what the approximate drop is. So 70 centimeters added to the Weir would give 70 days at 7 cubic meters a second, I believe.
Yes. Yeah. If you think about those 70 days, it's about 2 months. So if that 2 months gets you through the August and September and the rainy season of October, then you achieve what you're looking for. So 70 days, perhaps this year might not be enough.
One comment I'll make on that, actually Brian presented it to the Watershed Board today, and he was able to provide the data that showed if we would have had a higher Weir this year, if you'll recall, we had that rain in May that we weren't able to capture, right? Because the Weir can't hold water until the water drops down to the top of the Weir. So we lost that slug of rain, and Brian was able to demonstrate that if we had that 70 centimeters extra storage, we would have been okay this year. There would have been no pumping, and we would have been able. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You can tell the story better than I.
In that period, we had a 58 cubic meters a second discharge into the water control. The gates are open as we're not authorized to hold any of that. We can't hold any of that. The water's well over the top. But in those 58 days, we would have ideally put 25 CMS in. That's what the fish needed. But we put 50 plus because we had no control. That 28 CMS for those 36 days would have been in the lake at the end of that period, and that equated to 140 days of 7 CMS, which was more than the days we were at 7 CMS this whole summer. And so it would have been more than 7 CMS, but there would have been no negative exposure, and it would have been at least 7 CMS. Yeah. 2019 was a much more challenging. That one would have been a challenging year with the news there.
Yeah, just, I think everything was shared, but the 70 centimeters was a number that we got at, and we, after hearing all the information, we understood exactly how that was gonna, help us survive over a couple months, and that's, I think, helped bring everybody together. And I participated on that public advisory group as well, and I think it was very fortunate that every group there did give up something to come to a consensus. That was probably one of the best turning points for us to continue to move ahead. And along with, we need education. You know, it's the whole river we need to tend with, not just the Weir.
Thank you, Larry.